program, AICTE sponsored same 15 days FDP, which was held, I think, November 2 to November 16th, 2020, during that Corona period.
Yes,
So that training program, actually, I have attended, which was conducted by Diana Madam. It's very nice. Actually, that title also, Pedagogic Principles of Outcome-Based Education. Am I right, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So that training I have attended, about Madam got the funding from AICTE and she conducted that program. It's really wonderful. From that program only, I came to know about Dino Masses Madam. In that, ma'am delivered a presentation about outcome-based education in higher education institution. She actually, after attending that FDP 2 weeks AICTE FDP, I become a resource person for conducting OBE based program in many colleges. Even in Ahmed University also I have conducted outcome based education, that workshop like that. So that only when I am submitting this proposal, I contacted Diana ma'am. Immediately she accepted our invitation, and after getting the concurrence from Diana madam only, I have submitted the proposal. Mostly to whom I have contacted, those people are very kind enough and accepted our invitation, and immediately they cooperate with us. That's why we have submitted the proposal. Then we have chosen the topic also, because we know, yesterday I told you, so we know the importance of the accreditation as well as the outcome based education, how we are going to implement the OBE, if starting from curriculum and then teaching learning and then assessment also. So I think Madam is the right choice for talking about the outcome based education and student centered learning, because outcome based education mostly focused on student centered learning rather than the teacher centered learning, what we taught in the previous years. So ma'am, I would like to welcome our Diana madam for this Atal 2 weeks FDP. Really I am happy to see you, ma'am. After a long time, we are meeting again.
Yes,
Same program, same title. Happy to see you. Similarly, I would like to welcome all the participants who are all joining to this session. Yesterday, it was very wonderful. Actually, all the participants attended the session. After that, they have interacted with Ramakrishna Chala sir. I think you may see in the invitation. He is from NITTR Chandigarh. Interacted with sir very well. The session went on up to 9:30 yesterday, even though late night people are very tired after attending their regular activities, but they actively participated yesterday. So now also I am expecting the same. Once again, I welcome our Diana ma'am as well as the participant for this 2 weeks AICTE sponsored Atal FDP. Thank you, Rajeshri madam.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I think it was a great thing that I was able to meet madam during the almost it was 2 years back, and madam still seems to remember every single detail about the FDP. I'm so grateful to all the organizers for having invited me here. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your warm welcome. I extend my warm welcome to the chief guest of this session, Dr. Diana Moses. She is a professor and head Department of Computer Science and Engineering, St. Peter's Engineering College, Hyderabad. She completed her PhD in Tyagaraja College of Engineering, Madurai, and she is having more than 18 years of experience in teaching and research, and also has more than 5 years of experience in software development and web design. She developed Android application for diagnosis of 25 different cardiovascular diseases from ECG. She carried out several projects funded by Government of India and AICTE. She has published more than 50 papers in referred international and national journals, and also has experience in administrating Microsoft Computer campus-wide volume licensing, and also in organizing Microsoft training and certification programs. So once again, I welcome you, ma'am, to deliver the session address for the AICTE sponsored 2 weeks faculty development program. We are thankful to you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation to share your expertise.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
for
Thank you.
inviting me in. And it's a pleasure for me to join all the academicians from around the country, people who are imparting education at various levels in the higher education institutions. It's good to interact with all of you now. Let me share my screens. Yes. The topic that was given to me was outcome based education and student centered learning in higher education. Now, I have outlined the presentations starting from where we derive our motivation towards outcome based education and what outcome based education is, and also look into a holistic aspect of the entire teaching learning process and the outcome based education. We see we are part of the nation building team, I should say, that the students of the adolescent age are undergoing training under each one of us at various levels in the higher education institutions. And this age group is something that needs some training, capacity building, skill development, and a lot of mentoring. So, having that in mind, where exactly do we see the motivation for outcome based education or the necessity for outcome based education? And then we will move on into the other aspects. Now, if you see the background of how this OBE evolved, we see all the higher education institutions deal with the youth of that particular nation. This outcome based education is not just restricted to India, whereas it's a global revolution in education, that I would say. When we look exactly into the Indian population, we can see that there are around 222 million youth in the year 1991, whereas it has exponentially increased to 333 in a span of 10 years. And then in another span of 10 years, there's another increase in the population. And in today's India's population, they say 30% of the country's population belong to an age group from 20 to 35. So we see this is the kind of population that we are dealing with. And more than any other profession, the education system and people involved in the education system have the greatest access to this 30% of the country's population. If we look into the state of today's youth, we see we keep complaining. As a matter of fact, all the faculty, every time when they speak to students, they say, it was not in our age. In our age, we used to be this, that, etc., etc. And we also compare ourselves and the technology we had when we were undergoing education and all that. And we start criticizing the youth of today, saying how they are involved or addicted to so many aspects, including technology, the mobile phone, the usage they have, the access they have towards internet, and all the consequences that come out of it. So we see a lot of bad habits being developed in the adolescent age. And probably people who are taking some course or the other in some higher education institution are more involved in these kind of aspects because of the high level of access they have towards technology. So before I even go into the depths of OBE, to just analyze at what level of understanding me and all the participants are having, I would like to raise a poll so that we can get to some point of understanding among us. So I would request you to go to menti.com. If you have your mobile phones with you, please log on to menti.com and use the passcode as 47589255. Use the code 47589255. You would be able to see a poll that is raised. Please participate in the poll. I'll be able to see your results. Are people able to see the voting panel? Is everybody able to see the voting panel?
Yes, madam, we can able to see and we can do.
Yes. So I think I'll share the screen so people can see what the others are coming up with. So people say it's because of technology, habit, a lavish lifestyle, entertainment, lacking vision, internet addiction, poor, lazy, eagerly watching social media. Yes. Yes. Okay. Not interested to play. Groups to community development. Okay. Because of health. Okay. Yes. Okay. Now, yes, I think I'm able to understand the audience that I'm talking to. So there are various reasons, and most of it revolve all around the lifestyle changes. We see when we grew up, or at least when I grew up, the technology exposure and the access to these things was far less. So that was one way of blaming it on the lifestyle. Now, what do they actually need when coming up with a holistic development? We are talking about OBE. OBE tries to achieve certain outcomes. On a bird's eye view, we will try to understand a higher level learning aspect than stick on to just OBE, so that it will help us understand things better of why OBE is required. So if we look into what sort of development our children need or the youth of this country needs, it would be a holistic development. What is this holistic development, and what do we target when we aim at holistic development? Holistic means to become something whole, or if it's derived from the Greek word called as holos. It means something complete. So when we try to provide development or learning, this development has to be complete in all perspectives. What are the perspectives that are actually dealt with under holistic development? So we see it is not just sticking to technology or trying to learn engineering or some higher education aspect, but the development of a whole being into a complete person that the society needs. That's what we would call as holistic development. In order to achieve this holistic development, we would require training on various levels, including intellectual, emotional, social, physical, creative, spiritual, and all perspectives of the a person is to be developed. This is generally called as the head, heart, hand framework. People call it as the head, heart, hand framework. Now, when we start with the head, it talks about the curriculum, the learning, and how we understand things, the knowledge that we gain. All of that takes part under the head aspect, whereas the heart tries to explain how a feeling of appreciation and the belongingness that a person has towards the society and the community. And we also look into the hand aspect of it, where the student can contribute something back to the society or create something new and to lead something in the society. Over a period of years, now if we see, we have concentrated more on the head aspect of the framework, leaving off the heart and the hand aspect of it, which is why we are not able to develop a human being as a whole. This starts right from the school. It's not just an engineering education, but right from the school, our schooling and the education system tries to focus more on the head frame than the heart and the hand frame. So it is not possible to holistically develop a human being without addressing the heart and the hand aspect of it. So all these three parameters have to be targeted. We should provide some training and learning for all three of these. If we talk about how education system evolved, people have been giving a wonderful quotes about education. All of these are written by people who started with some education system. It may not address to something that is in today's world. People say education is that which remains when one has forgotten all that he has learned in school. if we look at this quote, we can imagine that the learning aspect is not just what is taught in the book, but something far more important than that is to be given as education. All of these were quite interesting. Education is not filling a bucket, but lighting a fire. We have been trying to push a lot of things into the education system, and the education system, not just in India but in most other countries, have started following this kind of a learning system. So in other countries, people have realized that there is a change required, and they've started making modifications, while still India is in the process of changing the education policy. Now, this education in Indian perspective, if you see earlier, we have had a Gurukula environment where people stayed with a person, learned basic life skills, understanding of the nature around, the society around, the political aspects, and the history of things. All of them were taught, and they grew up as a person. This probably was the best form of education you can ever achieve. But looking into the Western culture and commercialization of these aspects, and when the population grew, the Gurukula method was not accessible for everybody. So the education system had to halt somewhere to shift into some commercial aspect of it, so people can, everybody can have access to education. But on the whole, this education has led somewhere astray from the essence of what we learn. So learning as such have been categorized at four levels. UNESCO categorizes learning at four levels. The first one is learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be. So whenever we talk of teaching learning, we are expected to incorporate all these four levels of learning: to teach somebody to know, to teach somebody to do something, to teach someone to live together, and to teach someone to be their own self. In higher education learning, we don't do all of this, and we only try to build that person on what they know and also on what they do. So these are the two aspects that we target. We train on occupational skills and how the technology or the higher education institution, be it an engineering domain or in finance sector or in business administration, these educational institutions try to train them to put them on the occupational front. So this is the most important task that we all target, forgetting about learning to live together and the learning of being aspect of the four pillars. When trying to build a holistic student, a student is with a higher education institution, probably 2 to 3 years period of time, which is a very crucial time probably in their lifetime, starting from 18 to 21 or 22, where they go through a lot of physical changes, emotional changes, and emotional and spiritual changes. So this aspect, we are expected to build the student. When trying to build a student, when we talk of student-centered learning, we must probably understand what sort of character we are trying to build. So, in the journal of character education, people have listed that every student, at whatever graduate level they are in, they are expected to be brought or built with two characters. One is called as the performance character, and the other one is called as the moral or the ethical character. When talking about performance character, it is doing the best that the student can. So in order to build the performance character, people usually give some challenging tasks. tasks that can challenge a particular student so that they perform better than what they did the previous time, and build a perseverance of the students towards upskilling them. This is about the performance character. And we are also expected to teach the student of the moral character, where we tell them of how to do the right things, or how to choose the right things, or to discriminate between the right and the wrong things. This is what education is expected to provide. So you can think of trying to compare and contrast between the performance character and the moral and the ethical character, where people look into goal setting, determination, self-confidence, initiativeness, creativeness, innovative thinking. All of them fall under the performance character, whereas integrity, moral courage, compassion, empathy, and all of that fall under the ethical character. So we are expected to build a student with both performance character and with moral character. If a student is built only on the performance character, probably they'll turn out to be something very competent in their field, whereas they may lack the basic morals in the professional front. So it is also equally responsible to inculcate all the ethical characters as the student is undergoing any higher education. So it is important to train them to be both smart and good. Having understood what the perspective of holistic development, how can we look into the components of holistic development? Holistic development involves three aspects. One is the physical development, the other one is socio-economical development, and we have the cognitive development. So there are three aspects in student-centric learning which are to be inculcated to achieve holistic development of a student. Physical development is more like the physical growth of the student, involving something about health and things like that. So most colleges, they try to introduce some physical development classes during the class hours, or they initiate yoga and meditation programs, and they also provide awareness on health and eating healthy and staying healthy and all that. So that is about the physical development. And we have been seeing that the higher education institutions do not directly contribute in the physical development of a student. They provide challenging environments for students to take active participation in sports, whereas it is not directly linked to the assessment of the student. So the physical development of the student is never assessed anywhere in the education sector. And then we also have social emotional development. Social emotional development is when a student is able to uh, accommodate himself in a social environment. This is, I don't see this as a problem to most of the Indian students. The reason is the culture that we are brought up in, the family structure that we are brought up in. People have the basic socio-economic emotional skills because of our culture, whereas countries abroad, they have high difficulty in training somebody on the social and emotional level. The reason is because of the freedom that is given to the children right from a very young age, and also uh, the family culture and the setup is quite different, where children are not pushed into a structure called as discipline. So people are given freedom from very young age. So they start expressing their emotional behavior at a very early age. So that is one aspect that is compared, and that's in contrast from Indian education system and those that are abroad. And this is also an essential part of holistic development. Uh, i- there are certain aspects that are introduced under higher education systems that can target this social emotional learning. These would involve activities that can inculcate self management and self awareness, and also some responsible decision making tasks, relationship skills, and social awareness. Although most higher education institutions do not contribute directly into this socio emotional learning, because of some tasks that we provide inside the campus, generally these are skills students develop over a period of time during their graduation time. Probably by giving some assignments, asking them to organize an event, or giving some leadership tasks, or asking them to work in teams. All of them will aid in the social and emotional learning of the student. So, these are about the two components of learning. The most important component that we will be addressing is the cognitive development. This is what this is the only aspect of development that most higher education institutions are aiming at. So instead of aiming just on the cognitive level, it would be great if the institutions aid in physical and social emotional development. And the research has proven that people who have received a good amount of training, or a conducive environment in which the social and emotional welfare of the student is addressed, has also contributed in 11 percentage increase in the achievement of the student on other academic levels. So this has been proven, and it has been taken as a study, research study earlier. So environments that are conducive of social and emotional learning provide better prospects for academic growth also. Uh, so it's important to include that aspects of learning in the ecosystem. Now, when we drill down to the education landscape in India, we can see India has got I'm sorry, I'm not able to. I don't think I'll be able to zoom and then show. There are most of the population addressing to education, and we see from an age of 5 to 12, people undergo something called as the primary education. This primary education is form of mandate kind of school environment that they go through, where the curriculum is decided by the government, either under matriculation board or under the central board or under the ICSE curriculum. So most of the students undergo the same typical form of education. The educational institution definitely plays a major role in their perspective of the curriculum that is delivered to them. Now, say for example, if the student comes up from a very good ICSE school, naturally the way they perceive that curriculum is going to be far better and advanced than most other curriculums. So this is about the primary education. And higher education in India has got higher education in India.
Madam Diana, madam, on request,
Yes, sir.
two slides are visible. Actually, next slide also. Can you make it a single slide, bigger one?
Okay, sir.
Because that other slide actually not visible, like very.
Okay, okay, I can do that, sir. I think it's because of the presenter view that I have.
Yeah. Now it is good. I think no. I think make it a presentation one. Yeah.
It's-
Now it's good. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So you can see when you go to the higher education level, the diversity of the education that is available in India is far higher than many nations. because of the availability of the educational infrastructure we have. And our education not only offers a bachelor degree, we also have post graduation, doctoral, and then postdoctoral, and then doctorate in science, and all of these. So as we progress towards higher levels of learning, these are having a diverse group of people catered to. So the education that is taken in is also of a very is also kind of diverse. So a person coming out from a different higher education institution may not take up the same or a similar curriculum when coming to that level of learning. So we see up to school education, the curriculum that is learned is almost common to all learners across the country, whereas after that, there is a lot of difference. So the learning aspect of it changes as we move forward to higher educational standards. Higher education in India is for delivered under four heads. One is the formal education, and the other one technical and professional education, under which we all fall. Most of us, engineering and medical professions, come under the technical and professional education. And we also have skill development and vocational training that is available under the higher education sector. And formal education involves most of the science and arts group of institutions, for which the key regulator is actually the UGC. So most of the curriculum that is framed for arts and science group is under the UGC norms. And for technical education, we have the AICTE, which gives out the rules out the norms for framing of the curriculum. And for skill development, we have the DGET, and all the ITIs and the ITCs fall under the skill development group. We also have vocational training schools, like say for example additional training institutions that are not regulated by anybody, but they still provide voluminous inputs to the education community. These training institutions, each of them offer a different range of learning. When we look into the educational infrastructure in India, we can see there are a lot of schools, colleges, and training institutions, and then most of the primary and higher education institution offered in the offline mode. After the COVID, we see a lot of rise in the online form of education. Once this online has entered, we see a drastic degradation in the quality of education that is sent across the country. So this is about the framework upon which we are expected to work. And having this in mind, we will specifically talk about higher education and what we can do in the higher education sector to improve or to provide holistic learning. The present system of study, as we know, there's a movie that portrays how the present system of study is really pushing the students only towards the cognitive aspect of learning, or even more specifically towards the mark aspect of the learning. So this has been portrayed in a movie called 3 Days. Everybody must have watched it. Probably after the film, a lot of people started changing the way they deliver sessions at higher education institutions. But it is true that India has got this approach. This approach does not seem to have this level of impact in many other countries. So this is an introduction to what our present state is. This in the mind, people understood that this system cannot support a graduate once he takes up his graduation. When this situation was realized in the education system, people started thinking about a change and started to think of all forms of development and to somehow contribute towards the holistic development of the student. In order for the student to develop on all three levels, some targets, some better benchmarks, rather than just the marks, are to be rendered in order to achieve a holistic development. So, in order to change the learning or the education system, imagine this example. Here, there is a carpenter. He's working on some furniture, and there's some rich man that is coming to the carpenter, and he says, prepare the best table that you can. So the carpenter tries to put in all his effort and then all his detailing, the craftsmanship that he has, and he came up with a table structure like this. He was so proud of the table that he provided. The rich man came, bought the table, paid him off, and then he took the table. This is an analogy to what we provide in the education system. The education system, we take a student in hand, we do what we think is best, and then we deliver the product or the graduate out of the institution. Now, after this table was taken up by the rich man, he called the very next day and said, the table has broken off. What is wrong with the making? Is what he called and asked. The carpenter was really shocked to see why the table has broken down. And he was not able to understand what could go wrong in the table, because he has put the best of his efforts into making of that table. Just like how we mold the students in the educational institution, we see we have put our best efforts into the student, but still the student fails the moment he graduates and goes out of the institution. And the carpenter analogically called to see, may I come and see how the table is now, and let me see some way of fixing it, is what he said. And he went to that rich man's place to find why the table has broken down. The rich man actually used the table in his garage. He's a garage owner who tries to clean cars, putting them over a table. The table that the carpenter had made was used to mount cars for cleaning. Now it's so obvious. The table has broken down because the carpenter did not even understand where the table is going to be used, or what is the domain in which the table is used, what is the purpose of that table, or what is expected out of the table was not taken into account when the table was made. Our education system is quite similar to this. We prepare the students not knowing what awaits them when they graduate. So this is how people started targeting the outcome-based education, to identify some outcome that is required or the domain in which the student will be put to professional front in terms of their outcomes. So this is where outcome-based education started pulling in. So when trying to compare with the traditional approach, the traditional approach is not mindful of what is expected out of a graduate, whereas in outcome-based education, we define specific outcomes that the student is expected to have by the end of their course. So this is just a meme of what is expected out of students when they graduate from a 4-year engineering course, or from a course of business administration, or from an arts and science perspective. May I know how many of the participants are from engineering background? If I can see some hands raised or some message. Okay. I see very few people coming up from the engineering stream. Okay. Is my screen again visible?
Madam, yes, madam.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we start looking for people with so much experience and understanding and technological competence at a very young age because the industry demands it, but not with sufficient amount of training that is inculcated. Having this in mind, people started defining outcomes. What is the education experience a student is required to have by the end of his 4-year period? So, from a student, what are we making him when he graduates? What are the attributes the student is expected to have when he completes his period of study? So, how do we convert a student into a working professional? Having this in mind, or it's not necessarily a working professional, it can also be an entrepreneur, or you may also train the student towards pursuing of higher education. So we start stating our outcomes or what is expected, and then try to change our teaching methodologies or the curriculum that is developed or the way we assess a student, and all of that which happens during the course of study in order to reach those outcomes. So this is the bird's eye view of outcome based education. So we can now see what motivated the formation of outcome based education and why it is more effective than the traditional education approach. So we can see the most of the educational sector try to empower the student to become professionally competent to take some placement. So in the industry perspective, people require technical skills, soft skills, organizational skills, cultural skills, and also the way they synthesize solutions or the way they solve business problems. So this is what the industry needs. Now, only 20% of students are at that level. Now, this is about the statistics provided by the US and Canada and Australian chambers on education. So, when asked what an employer wants, they want somebody who is adaptable, patient, and risk taking with new ideas. So we see the cognitive development or the component is nowhere inside what the employer wants. If that is not there in what the employer wants, what are our training to target? So we can see most of them revolve around certain basic skills. These are the 11 skills that are listed factually as the most important skill required for a student to be employable or to start with a new venture of his own. So we see creativity, communication, determination, patience, risk taking, all of it seem to have fallen into the 11 skills that are required. The lower the number that is going along with the skill, the higher their importance is. So you can see creativity ranks the most, and then comes communication. So education takes a next stand when the skills are accounted for. So, having this assessment pattern and having understood that it is not the cognitive development that is most required, how do we change our teaching process? Or can we define something that is universally common in the way we deliver higher education? So, this was taken into account, and people started stating what is on a minimum level expected of a graduate. Because I am basically from the engineering stream, I seem to have listed it as an engineer. But from people from other domains, you can think of it as a graduate to have basic expectation. So we see they should have problem solving ability in the context of societal needs, using scientific principles. This is the aspect where the cognitive development actually helps. And then use of technology and tools for local or global needs. So we see anything that an engineer or a graduate is expected to have is towards a societal need or towards solving some issue. So they should have the basic problem solving ability inculcated during the development or during the course of study.
Diana madam, I have a question. Can I ask now or last
Yes.
after?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Please ask.
You have given that 11 skills, no?
Yes, sir.
In that, education will not cover those things in general.
Education directly does not target on those,
Okay.
or in other words, most of the higher education institutions do not provide a direct training on these skills. Having understood these elements, probably those institutions that are offering outcome-based education and targeting towards the employability skill of a student have recent years introduced communication skill sessions, introduced analytical skill sessions, and things like that. Although they are not mandated by the curriculum itself, which is why we say they are not directly mandated by the education system in the higher education institution.
But as part of your holistic education, that should cover all these things or not under holistic education?
Holistic education is expected to cover all of that.
Okay.
But in the present situation, not all institutions, higher education institutions, are able to provide that holistic development. We are still talking only about the cognitive development. And once the OBE has been introduced, there are few other aspects which are now being assessed and the student is being trained on, although not directly, in some indirect form.
Okay, madam.
Our target is to achieve holistic education.
Okay.
Towards that, OBE is being inculcated.
Okay.
So this is how OBE came into evolution. OBE means to reach some outcome, and it was introduced way back in 1956 when people signed the Washington Accord. In 2004, they have defined the outcome-based education as a process that involves restructuring of curriculum, assessment, reporting practices in education to reflect the achievement of higher order learning and mastery rather than accumulation of course credits. This is how people started defining OBE. So instead of just sticking on to the cognitive development of the student, we also need to target the higher order learning capacity and the mastery a student attains in the other aspects of development also. This is one particular thing that I found quite interesting. There's somebody who says, I taught someone how to whistle. And the other person tries to test and then say, I don't hear him whistling. And the one who taught says, I just taught him. I didn't say that he learnt it. This probably covers the entire aspect of OBE. What the teacher teaches and what the student learns. Are they aligned to each other? Is everything that the teacher has taught was learnt by the student, or was it something else that a student learned? So this probably motivated the OBE concept, I would say. So it's targeting on what students learn out of the education, so which is why it is also called as student-centric learning. In the traditional approach, we see it is teacher-centric. People try to teach all that they know. and not probably what a student requires to know. So OBE tries to contrast it with the student-centric aspect. Uh, when we say OBE, it naturally talks about accreditation process also. The way we assess the level of OBE delivered to the student is through the process of accreditation. So accreditation is a method by which we measure the degree of outcomes reached by a particular institution, or specifically speaking, by a particular program in the institution. The main target of accreditation was to ensure equivalence of the course that they have taken up globally. So as globalization increased, people wanted to confirm of the competency and the equivalency of a particular course and a degree or a program to something else in another country, and to ensure that the fundamental aspect of curriculum has been covered in for that particular domain. Say for example, if we talk about computer science and engineering, there are certain fundamentals that are to be covered. So these are covered either whether they take it from a institution X or from an institution Y, they have still acquired the competency to work somewhere in UK or US with some company X or Y. So this was the basic idea behind accreditation. And the Washington Accord was a body that signed a treaty called as the Washington Accord, using some engineering accrediting bodies from 6 different countries. This was signed in the year 1989. Right from that point onwards, people have started looking into outcome-based education. So the first few countries that started introducing OBE was Australia, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, UK, and US. When these countries started inculcating OBE, the other countries naturally wanted to take part in the Washington Accord in order to reach the global standards. Just because they are part of an accredited organization, the students from these countries seem to have a better hand in terms of their employability. So other countries naturally want to standardize their education, and they have gone into this educational standards. And India has entered into our NBA or the Washington Accord in the year 2007. So NBA is the accrediting body, or the body that controls the accreditation process in India, and the treaty was signed by NBA along with the Washington Accord. And you can see in each country there is one accrediting body that is responsible for regulating the quality of education inside that particular country. And ABET is the organization that regulates in USA. ABET probably is kind of a common term when we talk of accreditation, and also about autonomy of curriculum. So ABET is the accrediting body of USA. When we talk of global mobility, this accreditation grants the student or an engineer the passport to confirm equivalency of his degree in some other nation. Just
Madam,
like
Madam, if you don't mind,
yes, sir.
I think India signed Washington Accord in 2007 or 2014.
2007 they have signed the Washington Accord, sir. 2014 they were converted into they have earned the full membership.
Because if you don't mind, yesterday when lecture was happening,
yes, sir.
he mentioned that 2014 it was signed first,
yes,
and
sir.
after that 6 years in 2020 only the full it has become full member of the Washington Accord.
Actually, sir, the first time they signed for a temporary member. Actually, India also became a part of a member. 2014, they signed in as a signatory member. So from 2014 onwards, we become a signatory member of Washington Accord.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's true.
Okay.
2000 onwards, we have the independent regulatory body. NBA was floated into an independent body out of AICTE. AICTE is an autonomous wing and NBA is now an autonomous wing. That's what they floated into two different wings in 2014.
Okay.
So talking of a graduate mobility, they started listing out what is required of an graduate when they complete their course of study. So these are what we call as program outcomes. These are laid out by NBA for us, whereas these are as prescribed by the Washington Accord. So whatever has been listed under the Washington Accord, the same has been rolled out by NBA to higher education institutions in India. So you see, we start with basic engineering knowledge, move into problem analysis and design and development of solutions, investigation of complex problems, usage of modern tools, and how engineer turns to the society, how applications can be targeted towards environment and sustainability, the ethics that are involved, working in teams, communication, lifelong learning, project management, and finance. So these are 12 attributes which a student is expected to have when he completes his course of study or when he becomes a graduate. These are the 12 attributes the student is expected to have. Now, these are what we call as program outcomes. When we talk of program, we can see BE is a program, BTech is a program. So BTech in computer science and engineering. So that's what we call as a program. So when a program is completed, these are the outcomes a student is expected to possess. Having this in mind, we say most of these skills not just to target the cognitive development, but you can see a lot of social and emotional development also is involved in these 12 attributes. So people have shifted from the traditional learning to a problem-based learning culture. And this proverb, which is a Chinese proverb, has been in use right from the day OBE has come into place. So people, when they explain OBE, they probably use this quote and say how involving a student can reach higher levels of learning. And to form the basic OBE framework, people started with basic cognitive understanding, then activity based on that understanding, or some project based on that understanding, then proving that it works, then improving what you have developed. So this is going to be a continuous improvement process. That is the basic structure of OBE. Now, what do we say? What do we do? What do we prove and improve in OBE? So there are 4 levels in which we can prove and then improve a particular structure inside OBE. There are 2 basic bodies of accreditation in India. One is the NBA and the other one is NAAC, or National Assessment and Accreditation Council. NBA tries to target the program outcomes that are delivered under the Washington Accord to assess the outcome of a particular student, whereas NAAC tries to focus on the overall institutional standard and tries to accredit an institution based on the quality of education the institution provides. So it may not be student-centric in nature, whereas NBA is completely on the student-centric outcome achievement and its assessment process. So we can see NBA was signed, NBA signed the Washington Accord in 2007, and they were granted full membership in the year 2014. And from 2021 onwards, AICTE has mandated that people should follow the process of accreditation. If you look into the NBA accreditation process, it starts with a self-evaluation report of the institution which wants a NBA accreditation. And SAR means self-assessment report. This report includes various parameters that measure the degree of outcome that is reached by that particular program. So imagine BTech in civil engineering is offered as a program. What is the level of outcome reached by graduates and the teaching learning methodology in that particular program is what is assessed during this process of accreditation. First is to apply for the accreditation. Then you have a visit from an NBA peer team, and they have programs being accredited. And this process continues multiple number of times. You can be re-accredited, granted over a period of renewal and things like that. Once the institution is accredited, it grants the students graduating from that particular program an edge over the other students. So you see, they are kind of labeled as students graduating from an accredited institution. This becomes a mandate when they go in for pursuing masters at abroad. So whenever you have students pursuing MS, you can see that they prefer or they have a mandate of having completed their graduation from an NBA accredited institution. Here we talk of a report called as self-assessment report. What all aspects are to be assessed and what is to be presented in the report. Now, self-assessment report is actually, it's divided into criteria and it adds up to 1,000 points. And these points are given different weightages for various outcomes that are reached. So the basic target is around the 12 outcomes and how these 12 outcomes are reached by the particular program at various levels. So that is about the SAR. So you can see it starts from the vision stated for the institution and how a particular program aims to reach some specific objectives. So we state our objectives. Starting from the objectives that are set, we see how outcomes are being reached. So we start mapping the objectives that we define to reach with the group of students, and we also check whether we have reached our objectives or not. Now, most of the objectives and the outcomes that we state are qualitative in nature. We cannot measure them in quantifying numbers. So how do we assess this progress, or what are all the aspects involved in the assessment of these qualitative aspects? So this is where OBE starts. OBE means outcome-based education. So I say there are some attributes which the student has to possess. So I talk of some attributes of the students. We are going to map them to a lower level. Now, OBE is talking about assessment on a larger scale, which is qualitative in nature. So how do I say whether the student has achieved engineering knowledge? That outcome I may not be able to assess. In order to make the assessment process more quantifiable or measurable, we drill down the OBE process into the level of course, delivery, exams, quantification, and assessment. So we start with OBE and then we go into outcome-based curriculum. Now, when curriculum is designed, there are institutions that are granted with autonomy. They have the right over the design of their curriculum. Whereas other institutions stick to the norms or the curriculum defined by the affiliating university or under the UGC or AICTE norms, whatever was nominated is being delivered. So there's not much of contribution that can be done at a curriculum level in order to check if the student reaches a particular attribute or not. So we drill down a little more lower to see the outcome-based learning and teaching methodology. So you can see OBLT forms the most crucial aspect of outcome-based education. The way the teaching learning process is delivered to the student, or is it able to reach the particular outcome what we are expecting the student to have. And then we also check on how much we have reached, how much outcome or the degree of outcome that is reached in a particular group of graduates using something called as the assessment. So we will look into each of these four aspects and a bird's eye view of all these four aspects. I was informed that you have a series of sessions that are particularly pertaining to each of these topics. So there's somebody who is dealing with the outcome-based curriculum design, and there's somebody who is dealing especially on assessments, and there are few aspects in assessments that are elaborately delivered in this FDP. So I just thought I can give you a basic overview on how these are interlinked to each other and why it is important to assess the outcomes at each of these levels. So OBE, when talking of OBE, we will look into how the hierarchy of delivery is formed in OBE. So when I say outcome-based education has to be delivered in a particular organization, where do I start with? How do I percolate inside to the student level to ensure that the outcomes are reached? Now, here I have the OBE framework. You can think of the institution. Inside the institution, you have the program, and inside the program, you have a particular course. Say, for example, the institution that I work with is Methodist Engineering College. That is the institution. And the program that I am catering to is BTech Computer Science. The course that is delivered under that program is probably some Python programming or computer architecture or say operating systems. Each of this is a course that is delivered under the particular program for a particular student. So we start with drilling down of delivery of OBE from the institution level down to the course level. So we start stating what outcomes we need at the institution level. We call it as the vision of the institution, and we also list out how to achieve that vision using the mission statement. These vision and mission statements percolate into a particular program in the form of program educational objectives. Program educational objectives state what a graduate will have as skills probably 2 years after graduation or 5 years after graduation. So on a long-term level, in order to reach the vision, what are the objectives that I set for a particular program, and what outcomes are reached by a student when taking up that program? These are defined as program educational objectives or outcomes. And then you have the student outcomes. These student outcomes are as defined by the NBA. So you have the 12 POs that are defined. Along with the 12 POs, you can also add program specific outcomes that are specific to that particular program. Say BTech CSC. What is the specific outcome that you want a particular student graduating from BTech CSC to possess? So you can define them as PSOs. So both PO and PSO combined together forms the outcome that a student is expected to have. And then drilling down to the course level, we state outcomes for every course that is offered to the student. So we say they are called as either course learning outcomes, or you also call it as course outcomes, either way. And POs are also interchangeably called as program learning outcomes and program outcomes. And when we state some course outcomes, we also deliver these courses and check for some assessment tools and teaching learning methodologies to deliver this particular course. So starting from the vision of the institution, we have drilled the outcome down to a course level. Once this course is being delivered, we also include some assessment tools that go along with the course. So I assess a particular student whether they have learned that particular course or not, and also achieved that particular course outcome or not. This assessment, once it is done, we start evaluating what we have delivered. At the course level, it is called as course assessment. It only pertains to how well the student has understood that particular course or made use of that particular course and reached the outcomes stated for that particular course. It can be one subject for Python programming, or say, for example, mathematical analysis or things like that. And from the courses that are assessed, we try mapping how much of our program outcomes are attained using these course outcomes. So we start with course level and then go on to a program level. When we talk of program level our assessment, we are expected to include or consolidate all the assessment that has gone down to all the courses delivered under that particular program. A BTech CSE student will take up 8 semesters of courses, each semester having 6 to 8 subjects that are taken up by the student, including all the electives, core courses, laboratory courses, and things like that. All of them combined and put together, we assess the program for its effectiveness. And once the program is assessed, we see how far we have reached the vision that is stated for the institution using the institutional assessment metric. So once we try mapping our assessments, we try to understand where all we have failed to reach the expected level of outcomes. Then we map back either to the PEOs or the program outcomes, or drill down to the CO level in order to refine or fine tune or achieve better outcomes for the student. Throughout all this process, we also involve feedback from the employer or the industry that the student is going to accompany himself with, and take feedback from alumni, graduates, and all the other stakeholders of the institution in order to improve this infrastructure. So I can see OBE is delivered at the hierarchy of starting from vision, PEOs, POs, and COs. So this structure is going to form the basis of OBE delivery. And every time we assess, we will try to look into a smaller loop with some continuous quality improvement in that loop. If I see some course that can be improved upon analysis and assessment, I have identified that the subject Python programming can be delivered better in order to reach my overall outcomes, then I incorporate that change in the continuous quality improvement and then make that subject particularly better. The same is repeated for all the courses that are delivered under a particular program, and we try assessing the entire program after inculcating these continuous improvement tasks. And on a larger level, how well the program outcomes and program objectives are achieved is what we will look through the OBE framework. And we also look into how we are able to satisfy all the stakeholders in the framework. The stakeholders can either be the investor of the institution, or maybe a parent of a particular student, or it can be an alumni, or it can be an industry which employs our students. So it can be all forms of people who take benefit out of the graduation a student does through the institution. So this entire aspect is being continuously assessed, analyzed, and we introduce continuous quality improvement parameters into the system. Now, all of this, we try to go into the employment of the student. So in the traditional process, we see of look into the students only till the graduation part of the student. That's what we have been doing in the traditional process, where the assessment is done only for the marks and the student goes out and then graduates. And once the student graduates, our assessment stops there. Whereas in OBE, in order to identify where all the student or a particular outcome has failed in that graduate, we need to look into some additional aspects after the graduation of the student, check or receive feedback from those, pull it back into the ecosystem in order to improve our reach of outcomes. So in our OBE, we don't stop at graduation of students. Most of the institutions where I have been to, I see that the NBA, they start filing up their stuff, and most of the filing work stops when they see the graduate outcome file. So with the graduate outcome, it means that their part is done, whereas it is not so. In OBE, you try to target those who have completed graduation, and whether you have reached your required outcomes at the graduate level, try to get the feedback from that set of graduates, loop it back into your system in order to improve this system. So that is what is required in OBE. So you can see, when students graduate, you only check whether the program and the course outcomes are met. So at graduation level, we are only able to see whether that program outcome is met. But we need to also identify whether the program education outcomes are met, or PEOs. In order to identify that, keep track of the level of outcomes reached at the alumni level or those working at an organization 5 years after they graduate. So an institution applying for NBA is also expected to have data of students 5 years after they graduate from that particular institution. Only then the loop back mechanism of reaching continuous improvement in OBE will be complete. So we see long-term outcomes and their assessments require data of students 5 years after their graduation. So that would be required, even if not mandated by the accrediting body as of now. This is what is actually expected when we go in for assessments and accreditation. So you can see there are a lot of stakeholders who are involved. So when trying to assess, all of this tries to provide input on improving the teaching learning methodology and the way the outcomes are being delivered in the educational institution. So you can see assessment at the student level, assessment for the faculty and for the material that they provide. You also take assessment on the projects that are done, assessments on the and the inputs given by the industry, alumni and other stakeholders. And you also try to include all of them in as inputs to this OBE delivery. So this makes the entire flow complete. So in order to loop back, we will take feedback and necessary, identify gaps, identify deficiencies after a student graduates, and then ensure that coming students or new fresh graduates who are appearing will receive all those that the graduates did not take from the institution. So when trying to deliver this, we will target only this hierarchy. Mapping is always done through this order. It starts from the vision mission, mapping on to PEOs and to POs and then to COs. POs and COs, they target only short-term outcomes, whereas PEOs and vision target on long-term outcomes. We should still note that we are only trying to discuss about the cognitive development of the student. We have still not seen how the other forms of development are inculcated in OBE. Now, when an institution says that they want to implement the OBE curriculum, it includes a 5-step process. First is to identify the bigger picture and set the quality improvement parameter by identifying the objectives and outcomes, and then mapping the PEO to PO, PO to CO, etc. Delivery of these courses, assessment of the courses that are delivered, finding out what is lacking in all of these through the assessment that is given, and then looping back to stage 1. So this is going to be the basic framework. Now, when you look into organizations that are accredited by NBA for probably 3 or 4 times, you see those institutions identify some lack every time, correct on those parameters, and they keep improving the standard of delivery of the curriculum. And when that happens, naturally, the degree of outcome that is reached by that student increases. So people who are graduating from such institution tend to achieve better outcomes than those who are not graduating from such outcomes. Now, we always think of mapping of outcomes. Now, imagine how do we map these outcomes and how this mapping is important for achieving the outcomes. So, we start with the course outcomes. Course outcome is nothing but the outcome stated by the end of a particular subject. So, course is what we call as a subject in basic terms. So, I say, for in a particular semester, a student takes up 6 to 8 subjects or 6 to 8 courses. Each of these courses will have 5 or 6 COs. As per NBA norms, we are expected to have 4 to 6 COs, whereas people tend to push it to the higher level. Some institution mandate that it should be 6, and some they take it either as 4 or 5. On an average, 5 would be a better choice, is what people recommend. So I have taken 5 course outcomes for a particular subject. These 5 outcomes, say for example, are going to be mapped with some program outcomes or POs. These POs are defined by the NBA. We cannot change any of the POs. We have 12 POs, and all the COs or all the subjects and their COs are expected to be mapped with the program outcomes. This is an example of a CO that I have defined. Develop some assembly language programs using 8085 instruction set for various scenarios. Now, if I try to map these COs to POs, I need to identify what the POs are. These are the 12 POs that can be that are given by NBA. So it starts with engineering knowledge, problem analysis, design and development, etc., etc. When I say develop assembly language programs as a CO, what are the outcomes I am able to achieve at the program level? I try to find out what POs are achieved when this course outcome is achieved. Or in other words, when a student completes computer organization and microprocessor, it is assumed that the student is able to develop assembly language programs. If the student is able to develop an assembly language program, what are the program outcomes that will be met by the student, or what attributes are gained by the student at the program level? That is what we call as CO-PO mapping. So here I have got the second CO of my subject is to develop assembly language programs. I can probably map it to PO3 because it talks about design and development of a solution. I can also map it with PO5. I can say I am using a particular simulator for development of these programs, and I say it is a modern tool, and my student is using that modern tool for coming up with the program. So I can call it that it maps to PO5. I can also say I am developing some program that controls a particular hardware or some control system in the real world. Then I can say that the engineer is trained to communicate with the society. I can map it with PO6. So the more number of POs you are mapping to, it means the student is gaining so much of attributes, or he is inculcating and imbibing those attributes as he goes through the course of study. And we always see that from PO1 to PO5, they are directly mapped to the subject that is delivered. Whereas PO6 to PO12 are called as indirect POs. Indirect POs are those that are not directly addressed by the curriculum, but some aspect of it relates to those outcomes. Now, say for example, if I say some IoT system for something, then probably it relates to some aspect of the society. I can map it to PO6, although not directly, indirectly. There are some subjects that directly deal with some POs. Say for example, we have a subject called as professional ethics. That subject directly maps to PO8. Apart from that, you see PO1 to PO5 are mostly mapped to all the core subjects and the technical subjects. PO6 to PO12 are mapped by extra mandatory additional skill courses and things like that. Now, once we have mapped the COs with the POs, these POs will identify whether a student will achieve something 5 years after graduation. So we try to map with the program educational objectives and see if those attributes which I expect the student to have after 5 years of graduation, are they somewhere mapped to these outcomes. So if I say a student has come up with the, say for example, this is a PEO defined for Bachelor of Engineering under Electronics Engineering. They say graduates who are employed in electronic engineering related fields. So when I see that one of the student is working somewhere in HCL into the hardware development side, then I can claim that because the student has achieved that outcome in a particular course, he has attained some program outcome, one of the 12 outcomes, by which the program educational objective is earned or satisfied after 5 years of the period of study. So right from short-term analysis, we go into long-term analysis by mapping them into the program educational objectives. These in turn relate to the stakeholders that are involved in the community. These can be anybody. It can be a student, an alumni, or an industry person, an employer, or a parent, or a management body, or some professional body that is linked to it. All of them go under the stakeholder category. So these PEOs need to identify a link to one of the stakeholders. The reason is, now if there are no takers, there is no point in coming up with a product. The same way, if we see that there are no stakeholders for the environment, then probably nobody needs what I have manufactured, or the student that we have built and developed is not required in any of the environments. That's what it might relate to. So it is necessary to map the PEOs to who the stakeholder is. So having understood how this OBE hierarchy is, we will see how curriculum is designed. Now, in order to see how the curriculum is designed, can curriculum design have an impact on the outcome that is delivered? My question is, can the curriculum that is developed change the outcome that is attained by a particular graduate? Probably yes, because
maybe curriculum along with the teaching and learning.
Only the curriculum.
Okay.
Ma'am, actually, in tier one colleges means I think we can have the meeting with the stakeholders and we can change.
Yes, sir.
But for the tier two, the affiliated colleges and all, whatever the curriculum they have fixed by the university, they have to follow.
Yes, of course. So we see curriculum does have a major role in the outcome that is provided or delivered. But for tier one colleges, they have the autonomy to change their curriculum, whereas tier two colleges do not have the autonomy. So we see this curriculum, whatever is belonging to tier 2 colleges, what we see in the orange color hexagon there, only that whatever is prescribed by government or higher education directives are used for curriculum design, whereas tier 1 colleges can take all the other aspects into account and then design their own curriculum. I think you already you might have another session exclusively on curriculum design. So these are the aspects that are to be taken care of when designing the curriculum. Now that autonomy is granted for so many institutions, UGC AICTE has laid out a basic structure for curriculum design. So they say these are the number of credits that are required for a student. They also give the split up of how many credits are to be gained under the science and humanities category, under the engineering course category, under the program core courses, how many credits. So this structure is available as model curriculum for different higher education programs. So if you look into the AICTE portal, they have laid out this structure for all higher education courses. So they have this credit breakup structure for all the courses. And if the curriculum is to be designed, we need to fit our curriculum inside the structure that is given to us. Now they also list out when to place an open elective, in which semester to place, how many number of credits are to be given to each open elective. The same for core elective courses, core courses, and mandatory courses. All of them are laid out in the AICTE model curriculum. So if you have time, you can look into the model curriculum by AICTE for various courses. They also provide some basic programs or some basic courses that are to be delivered to a particular group of students. Now, this one is taken for AI and machine learning. So these are the subjects which AICTE themselves have recommended for AI and ML students. So the same way you can look into the traditional engineering programs. They have the list of courses already defined. So not much of change in the list of courses is offered for those structures. Whereas all the new and upcoming branches of engineering, the AICTE has provided guidelines on the curriculum design. Only autonomous colleges have the authority to make changes in the curriculum design. So probably that is kind of having a restricted scope. Whereas something that can be modified and voluminously used to reach the outcomes is in the domain of outcome-based learning and teaching. So that is the most important or crucial aspect of OBE in higher education system. So when coming to talk about the teaching learning methods, we see the outcomes that are reached are a result of both the teacher's approach and the student's approach. The perspective in which a teacher teaches the subject and the perspective in which the student takes in or learns that subject. So thinking of these, there are few methods that are formalized by various, what do you call as, these are called as teaching learning methods. Or they are formally named as information transmission or teacher-focused teaching learning approach. This approach is what we have been traditionally using, and we shift from that information transmission approach to the conceptual change approach. This conceptual change is more like student-focused. The specific characteristics of these teaching methods are, in the information transmission approach, a faculty tries to list a lot of facts to the students. So they only look into what is available in the textbook. They start listing out facts. People just memorize those facts and they inform the students of what is available. So there's no level of interaction from the student end towards the faculty. And the other one is they tend to give a lot of notes. So if you see some faculty who are having these traits, probably they're still sticking on to the information transmission mode of teaching approach. If people have this transmission mode, it is very hard to reach the outcomes. So this is the implication of the teaching approach on reaching the outcomes that are required. If everybody in the institution tries to follow the same approach of teaching, probably we will never be able to meet the outcomes that are required of the student. Or in other words, we will not be able to deliver OBE at all. So it is important for the teacher to go into the conceptual change approach where student is being provoked for thinking. So during the delivery of the course, people ask a lot of questions which provoke the student and their thinking skills. So you, instead of just teaching a C program, they say, try out this, check whether you are getting an output. This could improve the way in which the student perceives the teaching. And you also have to think of new ways in which the subject can be delivered and help the student to generate their own notes. This kind of, when I was looking into how the assessment patterns were and things like that, helping the student prepare the notes by himself does a lot more in the teaching process than in the assessments. Now, the way they perceive things, the way they take it forward, and the way the outcome is reached changes a lot when this change happens. Instead of dictating notes, allowing the student to take notes by themselves, or allowing the student to prepare his own notes and then to submit. These are forms where in the slightest and the thinnest of activities you see OBE can change things. These are two forms of teaching approaches, and we see the conceptual change approach includes elements of the information transmission approach, which means when a teacher is trying to provoke some conceptual thinking in a student, they also list out facts and information, but the vice versa is not true. Somebody who is just listing out facts cannot help in the conceptual teaching approach. And conceptual change is more satisfying for the teachers than the ITTF approach. And when we look into the student approach towards learning, how the student perceives the subject, there are two forms of learning. These are listed by in the Journal of Education and Learning. There are two approaches that are indicated. One is a deeper approach and the other one is called as the surface approach. Most of the students tend to take the surface approach. The reason is when they go in for examinations or when they are assessed for their skills, if they use the surface approach and learn some basic shallow aspects of the subjects, they will still be able to pass through the subject instead of just trying to excel in it. Our assessment, our examination, our pattern of identifying the skill in the student tries to assess only the shallow understanding of the student or the basic levels of learning. So most of our students try to take the surface approach for learning. But if our assessment patterns change, probably we can inculcate the deep approach of learning in students. So we see a conceptual change approach in teaching is associated with deep approach in learning. So unless the teacher teaches at a conceptual change level, it is not possible for the student to relate to the subject in a deep approach level. And it in turns leads to how the outcomes are reached. So conceptual change goes into deep learning approach, and then naturally to higher reach of outcomes. So you can see it starts from level 1 to level 4. So we start with the ITTF approach and go into the CCSF approach. Now, looking into the teaching learning aspect, this is called as the Edgar Dale's cone of learning, where they try to check what degree of learning has gone into the student. Say after 2 weeks, we tend to remember only 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, whereas 90% of what we say and do. So you see, this is why project-based learning has gained importance in the OBE approach. So the more that people are pushed into doing part of or analysis or project work kind of thing, where they sit and work on it, the more they remember, the more they understand. So that is the direct relationship between the project-based learning approach and OBE. The last aspect of OBE is the outcome-based assessment. This was quite challenging for me to read. Assessment is the engine which drives student learning. And after I read, I was able to relate and say, if the question paper that I set for a student is of a different level, over a period of time, the next batch and following batch and over some batches, their ways of learning the subject will naturally change. So the key element to delivering OBE at the student level and how a student perceives the learning aspect is through assessment. So the more effective the assessment pattern is, the more effective the OBE delivery will be, and the more effective the learning will be. I thought I'll just quickly run through some aspects of learning before I conclude. So we see, when did the Pilgrims land at Plymouth Rock? It says 1620. And the student, as he writes, he thinks, as you can see, I've memorized this utterly useless fact long enough to pass the test question, and now I intend to forget it forever. Most of what is delivered to the student is like that, where they take it, they somehow memorize it till the end of the test, and they intend to forget it forever after the test, which means there is no use or application of that whatever they learned after the assessment is over. So you can say people tend to think that exam is a silent killer of learning, or it decides what the student learns and what the student omits from learning. This is kind of feed forward and there is no backward tracing in it. Now, in order to address this, we probably have to look into the assessment, see how the assessment helps in application of what they learned in regular use. Now, that I can say constitutes to different levels of learning. There are probably 3 domains of learning, one on the cognitive domain, affective domain, and the psychomotor domain. Cognitive domain addresses the thinking ability of a student. Affective domain addresses the emotional ability of the student, and psychomotor domain aspects to the physical aspect of the learning. When we looked into holistic learning, we saw 3 aspects: the physical development, social and emotional development, and the cognitive development. So in learning also, you see the learning happens in the same three domains. We call it as cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domain. So the examples that go on under the cognitive domain could be memorizing or reasoning a particular concept that they have learnt in a subject. An affective domain, which does not come into the assessment of higher education institution. We don't look into appreciation or motivation of whatsoever the student comes up with. Whereas psychomotor domain, we test to some extent in the form of teamwork or a presentation or a project development. On those lines, we assess little part of the psychomotor domain, but most of our assessment lies only to the cognitive domain of learning. And to see what level of learning the student has reached, we have a framework called as the Bloom's taxonomy. This taxonomy relates to assessing the level of learning of a student. It was brought out by Dr. Benjamin Bloom, and it has 6 levels. It starts with the basic understanding knowledge level, and then knowledge, or it's also called as the remembering level. To see whether a student has reached this knowledge level, or is the student able to remember something, all the question or the assessment tools that we use can have some of these verbs that are listed below. So I say, if I want to check whether the student has knowledge on that particular subject, I ask the student either to define something, or to label something, or to quote something, etc. So my assessment tools can have any of these keywords to see if that level of learning is reached by the student or not. So if I say remembering level is reached, then my assessment tool should have one of these verbs. It can be a group discussion, it can be an MCQ test, or it can be a presentation at a conference, or it can be a quiz that is conducted. So it can be any assessment tool. It can even be an examination. So it can be any assessment tool, but these keywords are used to test the level of learning at remembering level. Then we have comprehension or understanding. We have application or applying, and then we have analyzing or drawing inferences, and then we have evaluate level, and we have create level. So we the Bloom's taxonomy tries to present itself under 6 levels of learning, starting with the basic remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. When I see people mapping their outcomes to some of these learnings, we always try to map our course outcomes to program outcomes and say at what level that outcome is reached. Say, for example, I reach a program level, outcome level 5. Usage of modern tool is PO5. When I say and map that one of my subject or outcome is mapping to PO5, I also need to mention at what level it maps, either at remembering level, or at understanding level, or applying level, or whatsoever. We see what I have observed when looking into mapping is people try to map to level 6 so many times. Creating is at level 6, which is very, very hard to reach. So only projects that is carried out at the student level can map to create level. When people think that writing a new program for addition of 2 numbers, or coming up with a circuit for achieving so many tasks, they try to map it to the create level, which is actually wrong. Create has to have some innovative component in it. Unless there is an innovative component, we cannot map it to create level. So we map to one of these levels of learning. And we also see there are certain specific verbs that are given for mapping to these levels. We are aware of the cognitive domain and their mapping. These Bloom's taxonomy verbs have been in use for quite a long time. We also have verbs for the psychomotor domain and its assessment. In psychomotor domain, we see that we check whether the student is able to perceive, set, or is able to take some guided response, or formulate a mechanism, or complete a response, or how well the student adapts or organizes himself. So it is also essential to map the outcomes at the psychomotor domain also. NBA as of now does not mandate mapping of your outcomes in the psychomotor domain. We are only trying to map at the cognitive domain. The psychomotor and the affective domains are not being mapped now. NBA is not asking for these mapping. But when you think of holistic development of a student or student development on a complete level, we should probably include psychomotor domain mapping and also the affective domain mapping. These are also required to prove that we are developing a student on the holistic level. So in order to address the other two aspects, apart from the cognitive, we have two other aspects. AICTE has introduced two programs. One is the Universal Human Values that is delivered, part of the student induction program, and it is also a 3-credit mandatory course that is introduced in the curriculum. So this is one way of introducing affective domain into the higher education curriculum, and the other one is using the mentoring mechanism. AICTE has mandated that a mentor has to be allotted for every 15 students. So you see, using the mentoring system, we are trying to reach the affective domain and also the psychomotor domain. So these are aspects now our higher education institutions are taking up to achieve holistic development. So this OBE on a whole, you start with planning of your curriculum, developing of your courses, implementing or delivery of your courses, evaluation of those courses, and then falling back into curriculum design. So this is how I have laid out a bird's eye view of what OBE is. I thought I can take a short quiz on what we have covered till today, whatever we have covered earlier. Would that be okay? Would a quick quiz be okay with everybody?
Yes, madam. Okay, madam.
Okay. So I think I should be exiting from the screen for me to view the answers. If at all you type something on the box. What are the components of holistic learning that we have seen today? We have looked into 3 components of holistic learning.
Actually, it covers head, heart, hand.
Yes,
At
very,
the same
very
time,
correct.
maybe we can say that cognitive and other that way also.
Yes,
Cognitive
sir.
and psychomotor and affective.
Yes, sir. Exactly. Physical, socio emotional, and cognitive. These are the 3 aspects of holistic development. And there are 2 characters which are to be built in a student in order to form a complete development in the student. Remember what those characters are?
Performance character and moral character, madam.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. And when was the Washington Accord signed?
2007.
Great, sir. It was the original Washington Accord was signed only with 6 countries
India. Okay.
in 1989. India has signed the accord in these are the 6 countries that took part in the Washington Accord in the first phase. India joined this accord in the year 2007. India was granted full membership in the year 2014.
Okay, good.
What are the levels in model hierarchy of the outcomes? So where do we start our assessment process? and how do we follow things. We usually start with the vision, mission, followed by PEOs,
Program application objectives, POs, COs.
programs, and learning outcomes or course outcome. These are at the short-term level and PEOs are at the long-term level. How many POs are defined by NBA?
12, madam.
12. Wonderful. Can people list the POs?
Yes. Basically, there are 5 POs which are directly talking about the technical thing, and then 7 are non-technical. Basically, they are related to the affective and like that.
Psychomotor domain. Wonderful. Yes.
Right.
So you start from engineering knowledge, analysis, design, investigation, tool, society, sustainability, ethics, teamwork, communication, management, and lifelong learning. And what are the 2 teaching approaches we have seen today? One is
CC.
yes, it's information transmission and conceptual change. The teaching approach required for delivering or effectively delivering OBE is the conceptual change based student focused teaching approach. And there are 2 learning approaches. One is surface approach and the deep.
3 domains. No?
Now there are 3 domains
3
of
domains.
learning.
Cognitive domains, psychomotor, and affective.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Who introduced Bloom's taxonomy?
Benjamin Bloom's.
Dr. Benjamin Bloom. Wonderful. When was Bloom's taxonomy introduced?
I think 1956, something at that range.
Yes, sir. 1956.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Wonderful, sir. So, what are the levels of learnings in the revised taxonomy?
6 levels, not changed.
Oh.
Only the change in the create and evaluate only. Basically, they made it into synthesis.
So instead of synthesis, they use it as evaluating and creating. Wonderful. So this is what we have seen on a larger scale. So I hope I have given a bird's eye view of why OBE is required and how OBE can be delivered on a holistic level. Now, after having seen so many aspects, we might, it has actually helped me to understand that OBE is constricting itself to the bare minimum holistic development of a student. Whereas still there is a lot more we can develop in a student that are still not defined under OBE. So that's what I have come to understand after so many NBA inspections that have gone through. I have understood that the learning or holistic development of the student, I am not sure if OBE is still able to grasp all of that under its PO structure. So with that, I thought I can conclude my session here. Any specific queries from your end? I am open for queries now.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for a wonderful session. I know very well. You see, when we talking about OBE, you have started from the scratch level and you have ended what we are doing in higher education institution nowadays. So the trend you have explained in a very well manner, ma'am. Actually, my thanks goes to Surya Prakash Raju sir also. He is the one who is answering for all 15 questions.
Madam, you have to give the certificate now itself.
Active participation is real motivation for the presenter, sir. Thanks to you.
Enthusiastic participation. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Madam, this material can be provided, madam, for us, student.
Yes, sir. Sure, we will share. Sir.
I'll share the screen.
Thank you, madam.
Yes.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for. I know when you are starting your presentation, the slide number is up to 370.
Madam, I have a question. Just another question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, AICTE is introducing this engineering education in the regional languages. I'm seeing a lot
Yes,
of
sir.
mails are coming in Odia language, Marathi language, and all. With these things, how we are able to meet this OBE, and then final purpose is Washington Accord, where the exchange of degrees is possible. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Then how it will meet that?
What most educational institutions have observed is people are not able to meet out the outcomes, or they are not able to complete their courses because they are not able to understand the language. So language has been seen as a barrier in reaching outcomes. Although language cannot help in NBA or the accreditation,
Correct.
it can help indirectly for a student to understand a particular subject. That is the best language can do. It cannot take things forward than understanding a subject. But because understanding a subject itself is troublesome because of the language barrier, if at all the barrier is removed, people want to verify if a student is able to achieve those outcomes. That is the only intention behind AICTE trying to inculcate. And we always have seen that the country has a lot of passion in the language that we have, and we do not want to learn in a foreign language. That
Correct.
feeling is always there. That's one reason, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Actually, really, we people are very happy for listening you for the past 2.5 hours nearly. Nearly it's gone, but it's actually clear, and it will give the participants a clear understanding about the outcome based education. Whatever be the thing we are talking about, always OBE in the higher education institutions. Since all the higher education institutions are moving for accreditation, either they go for NBA or NAAC. If the NBA experts or NAAC experts comes, the first thing they're checking is how the OBE is implemented in their university. That is their first question of the accrediting expert. So that the expert ask, and they will understand how the teachers understand the OBE, how they are implementing the OBE in the syllabus framing, how they are following the OBE in the question paper setting, how we are evaluating, how we are attaining the COs, how we are attaining the POs. Like that only they are checking, because recently we come across the NBA accreditation in the past last year, I think, to 2021. So the expert motto is to check whether all the faculty are knowing about OBE. They know about how to implement the OBE by easily checking the course file. The single document will explain you how you understand the OBE, starting from the syllabus and ending with the result. So this kind of FDP really eye-opener for all the faculty members, especially. That's why we have chosen this topic, because whatever be the workshops or faculty development we people are attending, still we have some doubts, and we have to be clarified something, because some experts are saying that your COs has to be mapped with all POs. Since we are engineering people, we are doing all kind of exercises, so your CO statement should cover all the POs. Some expert will say that no, your COs are not covering all the entire PO, all 12 POs. Some courses only, especially they are addressing that POs. Like the contradictory opinions are happening always. So if we are attending again and again these kind of workshops, again and again, if we go for the accreditation only, the people will get the clear idea about the OBE and how to implement the OBE in that. Because since your teacher understand that and implement that in the course delivery only, we can say and we can achieve the implementation of outcome based education in the university. Your university or the head or the running people never implement the OBE. It is on the hand of each and every one of us only. So it depends upon the teaching community people only. So I think this session will benefit the faculty to know about OBE, how to implement the OBE in their regular teaching subjects. So for the patient listening, I would like to thank the participants also. Still, the time is, I know that 9:20, even though our participants are listening and they are asking questions also. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and delivering your session in a wonderful manner, madam.
Thank you so much for inviting, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for active participation.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Diana, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable speech. So, based on different categories of holistic development and then difference between the outcome-based education and traditional education process, and then different stages of implementation in OBE curriculum, and India's inbound and outbound degree-seeking students list and education systems in India. So, thank you once again, ma'am. This will be helpful for the participants for their accreditation work. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Rajesh, madam,
Thank you so much,
feedback.
So I will post it now, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir. 1 minute.
I
Sir.
can understand the pain of the participants
Okay.
because we are also participants in other FDPs.
Correct, madam.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. Rajashri, madam, kindly post the feedback link on the chat, madam.
1 minute, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Rajashri, madam, shall I leave the call?
What happened, madam? She is not able to post the.
Sir, there is some network issue, sir. That's why.
Okay. Otherwise, you can post it in WhatsApp link. Also, we can make it from there also.
Okay, sir. I will put it in the WhatsApp group, sir.
Fantastic.
Rajashri, madam, kindly put the link in a WhatsApp group. Then participants can able to fill.
Fantastic. Good.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now you can end the call because already it's too late, no ma. So put it in a WhatsApp group.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.